Sorry, Lucas, I'll look into it. Jennifer Matthews didn't even look up from the tablet when she said it. Route 14 wasn't her problem. The system glitch wasn't her fault. Lucas Amaral had 7 minutes of his own shift left, and a report he should have closed an hour ago. But he knew Jennifer would fix it. She always did. The scanner beeped red 3 times. Error, error, error. Jennifer's fingers moved fast across the screen, resetting the damaged goods protocol while simultaneously pulling up Lucas's root issue on a second device. Aisle C smelled like cardboard and industrial disinfectant. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, turning her deep brown skin slightly gray under their clinical glare. "Jenny, you're gold," Vanessa Cardoso said, appearing from behind a stack of returns, her hand landing on Jennifer's shoulder with that supervisor warmth that always felt more like a leash than affection. Always finding a way. Jennifer smiled. That automatic smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes. Of course, no problem. Vanessa's heels clicked away toward the management office. Jennifer's shoulders sank 2 centimeters the moment her supervisor's back turned. She didn't notice. She never noticed anymore. The tablet in her left hand showed her own workload. Red, yellow, red, flashing deadlines. The tablet in her right hand showed Lucas's mess. She'd fix both. She always did. 3 meters to the left, Min-jae Park stood with a manifest in his hands. Eyes on the inventory numbers, but ears catching every word. He'd seen this pattern before. Not just today. Every day for the past 8 months since he'd transferred to this logistics center. Jennifer apologized for asking questions, for needing clarification, for existing in the same aisle as someone else. He counted them once. 17 apologies in a single shift. 11 of them for things that weren't her fault. 4 for things that weren't even problems. 2 for breathing in someone's general direction. Now, in the locker room at shift's end, Jennifer shoved her tablet into her bag, shoulders tight, movements efficient. She had 23 minutes to catch the 7:15 bus. If she missed it, the next one would get her home at 9:30, and she'd already promised Aunt Clarice she'd call before 8. "Jennifer." Min-jae's voice was quiet, but it cut through the metallic clang of lockers like a blade through silk. She turned, already forming the apology. "Sure. Sorry if I took too long to." He raised his hand. Slow. Gentle. A gesture that said, "Wait." No need to apologize. His dark eyes held hers with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time in years. "Just, who was it that made you feel like you need to apologize so much?" The noise of the locker room, the hiss of someone's energy drink opening, Sung-ho's laugh from the loading dock, the distant beep of the security gate, all of it vanished. Jennifer stood frozen, bag strap digging into her palm, mouth slightly open, with no ready answer. Because no one had ever asked that. Her throat tightened. The question sat in the air between them like something alive, something that couldn't be taken back. Min-jae didn't push. He just waited, hands loose at his sides, that slight tilt of his head that said, "I'm listening," without demanding a response. Jennifer's fingers went numb around the strap. She wanted to laugh it off, to say, "What? I don't..." But the lie stuck in her throat. Because she'd just apologized. Again. For nothing. And he'd noticed. I have to catch my bus." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Min-jae nodded once. No judgment, no disappointment, just acknowledgement. Safe trip home. She left without another word, but the question followed her onto the bus, into her apartment, into the restless space between waking and sleep. That night, lying in the dark with the distant sound of São Paulo traffic humming through her window, Jennifer did something she'd never done before. She counted. 17 apologies. In one shift. For solving other people's problems. For existing in shared spaces. For taking up air. Who made you feel like you need to apologize so much? Her pillow smelled like lavender fabric softener. Her aunt's voice echoed from a phone call years ago. "You've always been such a good girl, Jenny. So well behaved. Never any trouble. Never any trouble. Because trouble meant punishment. Trouble meant being too much. Trouble meant the exhausted look on her mother's face, the principal's office in 5th grade when she'd asked too many questions, the manager at her first job who'd sighed every time she needed clarification. So she'd learned. Apologize first. Smile. Make yourself small. Solve the problem before anyone notices there was one. Become easy. Become convenient. Become invisible. Jennifer turned onto her side, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. Min-jae's question sat in her chest like a stone. Who made you feel like that? Everyone. And no one. And herself, most of all. If you've ever felt like existing was a bother, like you needed permission just to take up space, stay with us. This story is for you. And if it resonates, subscribe and let us know in the comments. We write these stories because you deserve to see yourself in them, and your support helps us create more narratives that matter. Jennifer arrived 15 minutes early the next morning. She always did. Early meant prepared. Prepared meant no one could say she was slacking. The logistics center smelled like coffee and diesel fuel, the loading docks already alive with the rumble of delivery trucks backing into position. She clocked in, tied her hair back, every curl smooth and controlled, secured with a plain black elastic, and adjusted her ID badge so the photo sat perfectly centered against her white button-down shirt. The badge was her armor. As long as it looked right, as long as she looked right, no one could find fault. The ritual was precise. Arrive early, check the overnight logs, prepare the day's checklist, ensure her workspace was immaculate. Jennifer had learned that perfection was a shield. If every detail was flawless, if every task was completed before deadline, if her appearance was always professional, then maybe, just maybe, she'd be safe from criticism. Min-jae clocked in 3 minutes later. He didn't look at her, but Jennifer felt the awareness of his presence like static electricity. She busied herself with the morning checklist, eyes on the screen, fingers moving fast. Sung-ho Kim lumbered past with a clipboard, orange reflective vest wrinkled from yesterday's shift. Morning, Jenny. You fixed that Route 14 thing last night? Yeah, I got it, she smiled. Automatic. Course you did. Sung-ho grinned, crow's feet crinkling. You always do. Min-jae, you see the manifest for Sector B? They're saying 3 pallets are ghost inventory. Min-jae looked up from his tablet. I'll check the logs. Good man. Sung-ho clapped him on the shoulder and disappeared toward the break room. Jennifer's checklist had 19 items. 7 of them were hers. 12 had been reassigned over the past week. Small tasks, quick fixes, things that technically anyone could do, but somehow always landed on her desk. She opened her notebook, the cheap spiral-bound kind with a floral cover she'd bought at the discount store, and began transferring the tasks into neat handwriting. Each line in her notebook represented a small erosion of boundaries. Verify Lucas's shipping codes. Double-check Mariana's inventory count. Review the training manual Rodrigo was supposed to update. None of these were in her job description, but Jennifer had stopped questioning that months ago, maybe years ago. The lines had blurred so gradually she couldn't remember when her work ended and everyone else's began. Min-jae's voice came from her left. You're early again. She glanced up. He stood 2 meters away, tablet tucked under one arm, analog watch catching the overhead light. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were too focused. He was noticing again. Just want to stay on top of things, Jennifer said, closing the notebook quickly. Min-jae tilted his head slightly. That Route 14 issue. Lucas was supposed to close that before end of shift. He got busy. He gets busy a lot. Jennifer's fingers tightened on the pen. It's fine. It only took 10 minutes. 10 minutes you didn't owe him. Min-jae's tone wasn't accusatory. It was observational, clinical, like he was stating a fact about the weather. Jennifer opened her mouth to respond, maybe to defend Lucas, maybe to deflect. But Vanessa's voice cut through the moment like a knife through butter. Morning, team. Vanessa swept into the operations area, tablet in hand, beige blazer perfectly pressed, pearl necklace glinting. Quick huddle before we start. Corporate's pushing a new efficiency target. 15% faster turnaround on returns processing. I know we can do it. Her eyes landed on Jennifer. Especially with Jenny on point. You've been crushing those metrics. Jennifer felt the weight of expectations settle on her shoulders like a wet coat. I'll do my best. I know you will. Vanessa's smile was brilliant and empty. Also, Jenny, can you take lead on the new vendor integration project? It's a bit complicated, but you're so good at figuring these things out. Jennifer's checklist was already at capacity. The vendor integration would add at least 10 hours of work this week. But Vanessa was looking at her with that expectant warmth, and Lucas was watching from across the room with his usual half-smirk. And Sung-ho was nodding encouragingly, because Jenny always says yes. The word no existed somewhere in Jennifer's vocabulary, but it felt foreign, dangerous, like a word in a language she'd been forbidden to speak. Sure, Jennifer heard herself say. No problem. Perfect. I'll send you the files. Vanessa breezed away, heels clicking. Jennifer added, vendor integration, priority, to her notebook. The pen pressed so hard the paper tore slightly at the corner. She stared at the tear, at the way the ink had bled through to the page beneath, and felt something twist in her chest. Min-jae was still standing there. He hadn't moved. His jaw was tight, a muscle ticking just below his ear. When he finally spoke, his voice was low enough that only she could hear. You didn't want to say yes. It's my job. It's not in your job description. Jennifer looked up sharply. How would you know? Because I read mine, and I read the company handbook. Min-jae held her gaze for a beat too long. Vendor integration falls under IT project management. You're a logistics analyst. They're asking you to do someone else's job. The words hit Jennifer like cold water. She wanted to argue, to insist that flexibility was important, that being a team player meant going above and beyond. But the truth was there, undeniable. She was doing work that wasn't hers, because everyone knew she wouldn't refuse. Min-jae walked away toward Sector B, leaving Jennifer standing there with her torn notebook page and the sinking realization that he was right. The vendor integration was a nightmare. The files Vanessa sent were incomplete. Half the vendor codes were missing, the contact list was outdated, and the system requirements document referenced software the company didn't even use anymore. Jennifer spent her lunch break cross-referencing databases, her turkey sandwich forgotten beside her keyboard. The bread had gone dry and curled at the edges by the time she remembered it existed. She took a bite anyway, chewing mechanically while her eyes scanned endless rows of vendor data. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Clarice. Don't forget to eat lunch, baby. You work too hard. Jennifer typed back a quick, I'm eating now, and returned to the spreadsheet. The irony wasn't lost on her, lying to her aunt about self-care while actively neglecting it. Lucas appeared at 1:47 p.m., hands in his pockets, that casual slump that said, I'm too busy to deal with this. Hey, Jenny, can you cover my 2 p.m. inventory check? I've got that thing with HR. Jennifer didn't look up from the screen. What thing? Just, HR stuff. Lucas shrugged. It'll only take you like 20 minutes. 20 minutes she didn't have. Her own 2 p.m. task was reconciling a 3-week-old discrepancy in the returns log. But Lucas was already edging toward the door, and Jennifer's mouth was already forming the word. She's busy. Min-jae's voice came from the doorway. He stood with his arms crossed, not aggressively, just present. Immovable. Lucas blinked. What? Jennifer's busy. Min-jae's tone was even. No anger, no confrontation, just fact. I'll handle your inventory check. Okay. Lucas looked between them, confused, then shrugged and left. Jennifer stared at Min-jae. You didn't have to do that. You were about to say yes. So? So you don't want to. Min-jae stepped into the room, hands loose at his sides. You just think you have to. Jennifer's chest tightened. You don't know that. I watched you. Min-jae pulled a chair over and sat down, not close enough to invade her space, but close enough that she couldn't ignore him. Yesterday, you apologized 17 times. 11 of them were for things that weren't your fault. 4 were for things that weren't even problems. 2 were for literally existing in someone's proximity. The air left Jennifer's lungs. You counted? I noticed. Min-jae leaned back slightly, his dark eyes steady. And I kept noticing. Every day you apologize. For asking questions. For needing help. For existing in the same room as someone else. So I started counting. Because I wanted to be sure I wasn't imagining it. Jennifer's hands curled into fists on her lap. Her nails dug into her palms, the small pain grounding her against the wave of exposure rolling through her chest. That's weird. Why would you do that? Because no one else was paying attention. Min-jae's voice softened, just a fraction. And because I know what it looks like when someone is making themselves small to survive. The word survive hit Jennifer like a punch. She turned back to her screen, fingers trembling slightly as she clicked through vendor codes. I'm fine. I didn't say you weren't. Then what are you saying? Min-jae was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, like he was handling something fragile. I'm saying that you're competent. You solve problems faster than anyone here, but you act like you need permission to take up space. And I'm wondering, who taught you that? Jennifer's throat closed. She couldn't look at him, couldn't breathe, couldn't form a response that wouldn't crack her wide open. Images flashed through her mind, her mother's exhausted face when Jennifer asked for help with homework, the teacher who'd called her disruptive for asking too many questions, the first boss who'd made her feel like every request was an imposition. Jennifer's voice came out strangled. I don't know how to be any other way. I think you do, Min-jae said quietly. I think you've just forgotten. He stood, picked up Lucas's task sheet from the desk, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused and looked back. I'll handle Lucas's inventory check. You eat your lunch, the real lunch, not 3 bites of a dry sandwich. He left before she could argue. Jennifer sat alone in the break room, staring at her half-eaten sandwich, and realized she couldn't remember the last time someone had told her to take care of herself without expecting something in return. By Thursday, the pattern had shifted. Min-jae started intercepting requests directed at Jennifer, not loudly, not dramatically, just redirecting. When Lucas tried to push another last-minute task her way, Min-jae offered to handle it first. When Sung-ho asked Jennifer to double-check a manifest real quick, Min-jae appeared with the corrected version before she could respond. At first, Jennifer didn't know how to process it. The absence of constant requests felt like missing a step on a staircase, disorienting, unsettling. She'd built her entire work identity around being the person who said yes, who solved problems, who made things easier for everyone else. Without that role, who was she? The question haunted her during the quiet moments between tasks, when her checklist was manageable for the first time in months, and she didn't know what to do with the breathing room. Vanessa noticed. Of course she did. Jenny, can I talk to you for a second? Vanessa's voice was honey-sweet, her hand guiding Jennifer toward the quieter corner near the supply closet. Is everything okay between you and Min-jae? Jennifer blinked. What? Yeah, why? It's just... Vanessa tilted her head, concern painting her features like a careful mask. He's been a little protective lately. I don't want anyone thinking there's tension on the team. You know how important morale is. Translation: don't make waves. Don't disrupt the system that depends on you being compliant. There's no tension, Jennifer said quickly, the old reflex to smooth things over kicking in automatically. Min-jae's just helpful. Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. The corners of her mouth lifted, but her gaze remained calculating, assessing. Well, you let me know if anything changes. You're too valuable to have distractions, okay? Jennifer nodded, stomach twisting. After Vanessa left, she stood there for a moment, the word valuable echoing in her head. Valuable, not valued, not appreciated. Valuable, like an asset, like a tool that worked without complaint and didn't require maintenance or consideration. She found Min Jae in Sector D, checking a pallet of returned electronics. The scanner light painted blue streaks across his focused face. "Can I ask you something?" He looked up, setting the scanner aside immediately, giving her his full attention in a way that still felt foreign and unsettling. "Of course. Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "This." Jennifer gestured vaguely, trying to encompass the weight of what she couldn't quite name. "Blocking people from asking me to do things. Taking tasks before I can say yes. Watching out for me." "Why?" Min Jae was quiet for a beat. Then he set the scanner down completely and faced her fully, his posture open but serious. "Because I watched you say yes to things you didn't want to do, and I watched them take advantage of that. And I couldn't. I couldn't keep ignoring it. But it's not your problem." "Maybe not." Min Jae's jaw tightened, and something painful flickered across his expression. "But my father taught me something. He didn't mean to, but he did. He taught me that when you ignore someone who's suffering because it's not your problem, you become part of the problem." Jennifer's breath caught. "I'm not suffering." "Aren't you?" The question hung in the air, sharp and unavoidable. Jennifer wanted to argue, wanted to laugh it off, but the exhaustion in her bones, the tension in her shoulders, the reflex to apologize every time she opened her mouth, it all rose up in her throat like bile. "I'm just doing my job," she said finally, voice thin and unconvincing even to her own ears. "No." Min Jae's voice was gentle but unyielding. "You're doing everyone else's job too. And they let you. Because you never say no. Because saying yes has become your survival mechanism." Jennifer's hands shook. She crossed her arms, trying to contain the trembling. "If I say no, they'll think I'm difficult. So? So I can't afford to be difficult." "Why not?" "Because..." Jennifer's voice cracked, and she hated the weakness in it. Hated that he was seeing her like this. "Because difficult gets punished. Difficult gets isolated. Difficult gets forgotten." Min Jae stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the way his eyes softened at the edges. Close enough that his presence felt like a shelter rather than a threat. "Jennifer, you're not difficult. You're human. And being human doesn't require an apology." She couldn't respond, couldn't think. The walls she'd built so carefully, so meticulously over years of learning to make herself small, were cracking, and she didn't know how to hold them together. Min Jae reached into his pocket and pulled out a thermal cup. Steam curled from the opening, carrying the scent of fresh coffee. "I made extra this morning. It's still warm." Jennifer stared at the cup like it was a foreign object. "Why?" "Because I made it and you were here." He pressed it gently into her hands, his fingers warm against hers for a brief moment. "You don't owe me anything for it. It's just coffee. Radical simplicity. No expectation, no transaction, no invisible price tag attached to the gesture. Just presence." Jennifer took the cup, and for the first time in years, she didn't say thank you. She just accepted it. Let herself receive something without immediately calculating what she owed in return. The coffee was perfect, strong but not bitter, with just enough warmth to chase away the industrial chill of the warehouse. The explosion came on a Tuesday. A full shipment, 200 units of high-value electronics, had been sent to the wrong distribution center, Porto Alegre instead of Brasilia. The cost of rerouting was catastrophic. Corporate was furious. Vanessa called an emergency meeting, her voice tight with barely controlled panic when she summoned the team. Jennifer sat in the conference room, stomach churning with a familiar dread, because she knew what was coming. The system logs would show her name. Not because she'd made the mistake. She hadn't even been on shift when the order was processed, but because her login had been used to override a flagged shipment. The conference room smelled like old coffee and anxiety. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting everyone in a sickly yellow glow. Lucas picked at his thumbnail. Sung-ho sat with his arms crossed, face grim. Min-jae was calm, but his eyes were sharp, watchful. Vanessa stood at the head of the table, tablet in hand, her expression tight and controlled. "All right, team. We need to figure out what happened." The logs show the override came from Jennifer's account at 11:47 p.m. last Friday. Every head turned toward her. Jennifer's throat closed. The familiar weight of assumed guilt settled on her shoulders like a heavy coat she'd worn too many times. I wasn't on shift that day. My shift ended at 7 p.m. I know. Vanessa's voice was sympathetic, but there was an edge beneath it, sharp and cutting. But someone used your login. Do you share your credentials with anyone? No. Never. Then how? I can answer that. Min-jae's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He sat at the far end of the table, tablet open, expression calm, but eyes blazing with quiet intensity. The override timestamp is 11:47 p.m. on Friday. Jennifer's shift ended at 7 p.m., and she clocked out at 7:12. The login was accessed remotely using the supervisor master key. Silence. Thick and uncomfortable. Vanessa's smile froze, became something plastic and brittle. That's not possible. The master key requires two-factor authentication and managerial approval. Min-jae turned his tablet so everyone could see the screen, the logs displayed in stark black and white, which was granted at 11:43 p.m. by Rodrigo's account. 4 minutes before the override, I pulled the security logs this morning when I heard about the issue. Rodrigo, the operations manager, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face reddening. I was approving a backlog of requests. It was late. I was tired. I didn't look at each one individually. Then the mistake isn't Jennifer's. Min-jae's tone was even, but his eyes were steel. It's procedural. The system allowed an override without verifying the actual operator. Jennifer's credentials were used without her knowledge or consent. That's not her fault. That's a security failure. Jennifer sat frozen, heart hammering against her ribs, because Min-jae had just done what she never could. He'd defended her without apology, without softening, without making himself smaller to avoid conflict. He'd stated facts, calmly and clearly, and forced everyone to confront the truth. Vanessa's jaw tightened, her carefully constructed facade cracking at the edges. Well, thank you, Min-jae, for that thorough investigation. We'll review the protocols and implement better security measures. Her gaze flicked to Jennifer, and for the first time, there was no warmth, just cold calculation and barely concealed resentment. Jennifer, you're clear, but please make sure to log out properly and change your password regularly in the future. It wasn't her fault, but Vanessa had still found a way to make it her responsibility. To imply that Jennifer had been negligent somehow, that she bore partial blame for a system failure she had no control over. The meeting ended in uncomfortable silence. People filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact. Jennifer gathered her things, hands shaking, and headed for the corridor. She needed air, needed space, needed to process the fact that she'd been seconds away from accepting blame for something she didn't do. Min-jae caught up to her near the loading docks, where the afternoon sun slanted through the open bay doors, painting everything in amber light. You didn't need to do that, Jennifer said, voice low and furious and confused and grateful all at once. Min-jae stopped walking. Do what? Defend me. Correct the record. Pull the logs. I could have handled it. How? Min-jae's voice was quiet but firm, unyielding. By accepting blame that wasn't yours? By not making waves! Jennifer turned to face him fully, anger and fear tangled in her chest like barbed wire. You don't understand. I can't afford to have enemies here. I can't afford to make Vanessa look bad in front of the team. And I can't afford to watch you erase yourself to keep the peace. Min-jae's gaze was unwavering, steady as stone. You didn't make that mistake. You weren't even there. And you were about to let them hang it on you anyway. Let them add it to your file. Let it affect your performance review. Let it become another thing you apologize for that wasn't your fault. Because that's how you survive. The words burst out of Jennifer before she could stop them, raw and desperate. No. Min-jae's voice softened, just a fraction, but his conviction remained absolute. That's how you disappear. Jennifer's breath hitched. She wanted to scream, wanted to cry, wanted to run. But all she could do was stand there, walls crumbling brick by brick, with Min-jae's words ringing in her ears. That's how you disappear. He wasn't wrong. Jennifer made it to the women's restroom before the tears came. She locked herself in the farthest stall, sat on the closed toilet lid, and pressed her palms against her eyes, trying desperately to hold it all in. But it came anyway. Silent, shaking sobs that tore through her chest like something living and vicious. She cried because Min-jae was right. She cried because she'd been ready to accept blame for a mistake she didn't make, ready to add it to the growing list of things she apologized for that weren't her responsibility. She cried because she didn't know how to be anything else, didn't know how to exist without constantly making herself smaller, quieter, less. The bathroom was cold and sterile, the industrial tile echoing her breathing back at her. Her shirt was damp where tears had fallen, and she focused on that small discomfort to keep from falling apart completely. A soft knock on the stall door made her freeze. "Jenny?" Sung-ho's voice, gruff but gentle, carefully neutral. "You okay in there?" Jennifer wiped her face quickly with toilet paper, her hands shaking. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." A pause, heavy with understanding. "I'm putting a bottle of water on the sink. Come out when you're ready. No rush." She heard his footsteps retreat, the door swinging shut behind him with a soft whoosh. Jennifer waited until her breathing steadied, until the tears dried into sticky tracks on her face, then emerged from the stall. The water bottle sat on the edge of the sink, condensation beating on the plastic. She opened it, drank half in one go, the cold shocking her system back to some semblance of control, then splashed cold water on her face. Her reflection in the mirror looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, tension in her jaw, the face of someone who'd been holding too much for too long. Sung-ho was waiting outside, leaning against the wall with his clipboard tucked under his arm. He didn't look at her directly, just offered the quiet presence of someone who understood without needing explanations. "You don't have to talk about it," he said, studying the ceiling tiles like they were fascinating. "But I've been here 15 years, Jenny. I've seen this pattern before. They push, you give, they push more, and one day you wake up and realize you don't even recognize yourself anymore." Jennifer's throat tightened. "I don't know how to stop." "Yeah, you do." Sung-ho finally looked at her, his weathered face kind, his eyes reflecting years of hard-earned wisdom. "You just think stopping means you're a bad person. But it doesn't. It means you're finally respecting yourself enough to say you matter too. What if they hate me for it? Then they were never your people." Sung-ho pushed off the wall, his joints creaking slightly. "Min-jae knows that. He's been waiting for you to know it too. Kid sees things clearly. No bullshit. That's rare in a place like this." He patted her shoulder once, gentle and paternal, then walked away toward the loading docks. Jennifer stood alone in the corridor, water bottle in hand, and felt something shift in her chest. A tiny crack in the armor she'd been wearing for so long. That night, Jennifer called Aunt Clarice. She needed to hear a familiar voice, needed to feel grounded in something that predated all of this. The job, the patterns, the constant apologizing. "Jenny, baby, how are you?" Clarice's voice was warm, full of that maternal affection Jennifer had clung to her whole life, especially after her mother had become too distant, too exhausted to offer it. "I'm okay, just work stuff." "You working too hard again?" There was knowing concern in Clarice's tone, the same concern she'd expressed 100 times before. Maybe. Clarice laughed softly. That familiar chuckle Jennifer associated with Sunday dinners and safety. You've always been like that, ever since you were little. So responsible. Never any trouble. I remember your teachers used to say, Clarice, that girl is a dream, so well behaved, never asks for anything. Jennifer's stomach twisted. Aunt Clarice, did I have a choice? What do you mean, honey? Was I well behaved because I wanted to be? Or because I was scared not to be? Silence on the other end. Long and uncomfortable. Then carefully. Jenny, where is this coming from? Someone at work asked me why I apologize so much, and I realized I don't know how to stop. I don't even know when it started. But I think maybe it started young. Really young. Clarice sighed, and Jennifer could picture her aunt sitting at her kitchen table, hand pressed to her forehead in that gesture of weary contemplation. Your mama was tired, baby. You know that. She worked 2 jobs after your daddy left. Worked herself to the bone to keep you fed and clothed, and she didn't have patience for complications, for extra needs or demands. So you learned to be easy. You learned not to ask for too much. That's not a bad thing, honey. That's survival. Isn't it? Jennifer's voice cracked, and she hated the desperation in it. Because I feel like I'm disappearing, like I've made myself so small, so quiet, so undemanding that I don't even know who I am anymore. And I don't know how to stop it. Clarice was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentler but still uncertain, still clinging to the narrative she'd always believed. You're not disappearing, Jenny. You're just being considerate. That's a good thing. The world needs more considerate people. But Jennifer heard the uncertainty in her aunt's voice, the way she didn't quite believe her own words, the way even Clarice, who loved her, couldn't quite see how the good girl narrative had become a cage. They said their goodbyes with mutual I love yous that felt both genuine and insufficient. Jennifer hung up and stared at her phone screen. A text from Min-jae glowed at the top. Are you okay? Simple, direct, no pressure. Just presence. She didn't reply. But she saved the message, added it to a folder she didn't quite understand yet, but needed to keep. The next morning, Jennifer stood in front of her bathroom mirror for 20 minutes, staring at her reflection. Her hair was pulled back tight, every curl controlled, secured with the same black elastic she always used. The style was professional, neat, acceptable, safe. She thought about what Sung-ho had said. You don't even recognize yourself anymore. She thought about Min-jae's question. Who made you feel like you need to apologize for existing? Slowly, Jennifer pulled the elastic free. Her curls fell loose around her shoulders, wild and unruly, the way they'd been when she was a kid, before she learned that polished meant acceptable, before she understood that her natural hair was somehow too much in professional spaces. The curls bounced and framed her face, softer, more alive. She looked younger, less controlled, more herself. She almost pulled them back again. The reflex was strong, the fear immediate. But she stopped herself, left them down, put on her white button-down shirt and gray dress pants, adjusted her thin gold necklace, and left for work with her heart pounding like she'd done something revolutionary. At work, Sung-ho noticed first. New look, Jenny? Just trying something different. Looks good. He grinned, crow's feet crinkling. Suits you better. More you, you know? She didn't know. But she nodded anyway. Min-jae noticed, too. He didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered for a half-second longer than usual when she clocked in, and Jennifer felt something shift in her chest. Not discomfort, not fear, just acknowledgement. Being seen and not judged for it. She was testing what it felt like to occupy space. testing what it felt like to be seen as she actually was, not as the carefully constructed version she'd been performing for years. Lucas did a double take when he saw her. "Whoa, Jenny, going full natural? Bold move." There was something in his tone, not quite mocking, but not quite respectful either. Like her hair was a statement she needed to justify. Jennifer felt the old reflex rising, the urge to explain, to apologize, to make it smaller. But then she remembered Minjae's voice. "You don't owe anyone an explanation for existing. It's just hair, Lucas," she said evenly, and walked away. Vanessa called Jennifer into her office that afternoon. The space was small and sterile. White walls, a single motivational poster about teamwork that had probably been there since the building opened, a desk cluttered with corporate reports, and a coffee mug with a passive-aggressive slogan, "I'm not bossy, I'm the boss." "Sit, Jenny." Vanessa's smile was tight, the warmth from previous weeks completely absent. "I wanted to check in. You've seemed a little distracted lately." Jennifer sat, hands folded in her lap, spine straight. "I'm fine. Are you? Because I noticed you've been declining some task requests, pushing back on assignments. That's not like you." Vanessa tapped her perfectly manicured nails against the desk. "You're usually so flexible." Translation: you're not performing your role. The role of the person who says yes to everything without complaint. "I've just been prioritizing my core responsibilities," Jennifer said carefully, each word measured. "Making sure my primary projects get the attention they need." Vanessa tapped her pen against the desk, a rhythmic click that felt aggressive. "You know, Jenny, one of your greatest strengths has always been your flexibility, your willingness to go above and beyond, to be a team player. I'd hate to see you lose that edge." There it was, the gentle threat, the reminder that valuable meant compliant, that her worth in this space was tied directly to her willingness to sacrifice boundaries. Jennifer took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "I appreciate that feedback, Vanessa, but I've been reflecting on my workload and my effectiveness, and I think I need to set some boundaries. To make sure I'm delivering quality work on my actual responsibilities, rather than spreading myself too thin." Vanessa's smile froze, became something sharp and cold. "Boundaries. Yes. Jenny, I'm not sure this is the right time for personal experiments. We're heading into peak season. Corporate is breathing down our necks about efficiency targets. I need team players, people I can count on." Jennifer's hands tightened in her lap, but she kept her voice steady. "I am a team player, Vanessa, but I can't be effective if I'm overextended and exhausted. Setting boundaries actually makes me more productive, not less." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, eyes cold and assessing, like she was recalculating Jennifer's value. "I see. Well, I'll make a note of that. I hope this new approach doesn't impact your performance reviews." The threat was clear, subtle but unmistakable. The meeting ended. Jennifer left with her heart pounding, hands slightly shaking, but she didn't apologize. Not once. She'd stated her position clearly and calmly, and she'd walked away with her dignity intact. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Lucas cornered Jennifer near the break room the next day, all false casualness and performative friendliness. "Hey, Jenny. Listen, I wanted to apologize if I've been, leaning on you too much lately. I know you've got your own stuff to deal with." Jennifer studied him, recognizing the pattern immediately. The apology was there, surface level and hollow, but it came with a hook. "I know you've got your own stuff, but you'll still help me, right?" "Thanks for saying that," Jennifer said carefully, not accepting responsibility for his realization. "Yeah, so there's this shipment audit that needs to be done by Friday, and I'm absolutely swamped with the new routing protocols, so I was thinking maybe you could—" "She's not available." Minjae appeared beside them like he'd materialized from thin air, hands in his pockets, expression neutral, but eyes sharp. "The audit is your responsibility, Lucas." Lucas's smile faltered, his casual facade cracking. I know, man, I just thought since Jenny's good at that stuff, you thought Jennifer would do it for you. Min-jae's tone wasn't aggressive. It was factual, stripping away the pretense with surgical precision. She won't. Her schedule is full with her own projects. I'll help you with the audit if you genuinely need assistance, but Jennifer's not your backup plan. Lucas looked between them, clearly uncomfortable with the direct confrontation, then muttered something about handling it himself, and walked away with his shoulders hunched. Jennifer turned to Min-jae, torn between gratitude and frustration. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. Min-jae's gaze was steady, unwavering. Because you were about to say yes again. I could see it. The way you hesitated, the way your mouth was forming the word before you could stop yourself. You don't know that. I do. He tilted his head slightly, that observant gesture she'd come to recognize. And so do you. The pattern is strong, Jennifer. It doesn't just go away because you decide it should. It takes practice to break it. And sometimes it takes someone else holding the line until you're strong enough to hold it yourself. Jennifer wanted to argue. But he was right. She'd felt the yes forming on her tongue, automatic and unthinking, like a reflex her body executed before her brain could intervene. Why do you care so much? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Really, why does this matter to you? Min-jae was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting past her toward the loading docks where sunlight streamed through in dusty columns. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost vulnerable, a tone she'd never heard from him before. My mother died when I was 14. Sudden illness. One day she was fine, the next day she was in the hospital, and then she was gone. He paused, jaw working. My father. He didn't notice I was struggling. He was too lost in his own grief, too consumed by his own pain to see that I was drowning right in front of him. I learned what it felt like to be invisible, to be in pain and have no one see it, to scream silently and have everyone walk past like you don't exist. Jennifer's breath caught. Min-jae. A teacher finally noticed. 6 months after my mother died, a teacher pulled me aside and asked if I was okay. Really asked, not just the polite version people say without wanting an answer. And that question, it saved me. It made me visible again. His eyes met hers. Dark and intense, and completely honest. I won't do that to someone else. I won't walk past someone who's struggling and pretend I don't see it, especially when I see it so clearly. Jennifer's vision blurred with unexpected tears. You're not invisible, Jennifer. Min-jae continued quietly. You never were. Not to me. The moment came during a Friday afternoon meeting. The team was gathered in the conference room, reviewing the week's performance metrics. The air was thick with end-of-week exhaustion and the anticipation of freedom. Vanessa stood at the head of the table, tablet in hand, running through numbers with practiced efficiency. Great work, everyone. We hit our targets this week, barely, but we did it. One more thing before we wrap and you can all get out of here. Vanessa's eyes scanned the room before landing on Jennifer. There's a new project, inventory system migration, complete overhaul of our tracking protocols. It's a big lift, complex timeline, lots of moving parts. I need someone reliable to lead it. Her gaze fixed on Jennifer with that expectant weight. Jenny, I know you're busy, but you're the only one I trust with something this important. Can you take it on? The room went quiet. Lucas looked relieved, already relaxing into his chair. Rodrigo looked indifferent, checking his phone. Sung-ho looked concerned, his eyes flicking between Vanessa and Jennifer. Min-jae's gaze was steady, not pushing, not demanding, just present, witnessing. Jennifer felt the old reflex kicking in with the force of years of conditioning, the need to please, the fear of disappointment, the certainty that saying no would make her difficult, ungrateful, expendable. The voice in her head that whispered, if you say no, they'll remember, and the next time there's a cutback, You'll be first on the list. But then she thought about the 17 apologies, about crying in the bathroom while Sung-ho waited patiently outside, about Min-jae's question, who made you feel like you need to apologize for existing? About her reflection in the mirror that morning, curls loose and free. She took a breath, felt the air fill her lungs completely, a sensation she'd been denying herself for years by always holding herself in, always making herself smaller. No. The word hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. A small word, 2 letters, but it felt like dropping a bomb in the middle of the conference table. Vanessa blinked. I'm sorry? No, Jennifer repeated, voice stronger now, steadier. I already have 3 active projects that are demanding significant time and attention. I can't take on another major initiative without compromising the quality of my work. Someone else will need to lead the migration. The silence was deafening. Lucas's mouth fell open slightly. Rodrigo looked up from his phone, eyebrows raised. Sung-ho was trying not to smile. Vanessa's expression went cold, the false warmth evaporating like morning mist. I see. Well, that's disappointing, Jenny. I'll make other arrangements. I can provide documentation on my current workload if that would be helpful, Jennifer added, keeping her tone professional and calm. And I'm happy to contribute to the migration in a support capacity within my available bandwidth, but I can't lead it. That won't be necessary. Vanessa's voice was clipped, ice cold. Meeting dismissed. Everyone filed out in uncomfortable silence. As Jennifer gathered her things, she felt eyes on her. Some curious, some judgmental, some impressed. Her hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline coursing through her system like she'd just done something dangerous. Min-jae caught her eye as they left the room. He didn't smile, didn't make a spectacle of it, but something in his gaze said, I'm proud of you, with more certainty than words ever could. Jennifer's hands were still trembling when she reached her desk. She sat down heavily, staring at her notebook, the one filled with tasks that weren't hers, deadlines she'd inherited, problems she'd been expected to solve. And for the first time, she saw it for what it was, evidence of her own erasure. The aftermath was quieter than Jennifer expected. She'd braced herself for retaliation, for cold shoulders and whispered conversations, for Vanessa to make her life difficult in subtle, plausibly deniable ways. And while Vanessa's warmth had definitely evaporated, replaced with professional coolness and clipped interactions, the world didn't end. Lucas stopped asking her for help. He fumbled through his own tasks, made mistakes, learned to fix them. Rodrigo avoided eye contact during meetings, but assigned projects more evenly across the team. The system adapted, grudgingly, to Jennifer's absence from the role of universal problem solver. But Jennifer also noticed something else, something that felt almost revolutionary. She had time. Time to complete her own projects without rushing. Time to eat lunch without working through it, actually tasting her food instead of mechanically chewing while staring at spreadsheets. Time to breathe. Time to think. Time to exist without constant pressure. Her checklist, which had always overflowed into the margins, suddenly fit on a single page. Her stress headaches, the ones that had become so constant she'd stopped noticing them, faded. She left work at the end of her shift instead of staying late to finish tasks that weren't hers. Sung-ho stopped by her desk one afternoon with 2 coffees, settling into the chair beside her with a satisfied grunt. Heard you turned down the migration project. Yeah. Good. He set 1 coffee in front of her, the cheap break room kind that tasted like burnt cardboard, but the gesture made it taste better. About damn time. Jennifer looked up, surprised. You're not mad? Mad? Kid, I've been waiting for you to do that for 2 years. Sung-ho grinned, his weathered face crinkling with genuine pleasure. You're not a workhorse. You're a person. Act like it. Live like it. I thought saying no would make me expendable. Nah. Sung-ho took a long sip of his coffee. You know what makes you expendable? burning out so completely they have to replace you. Setting boundaries makes you sustainable, and sustainable employees are valuable. Actually valuable, not just exploitable. Jennifer felt something loosen in her chest. I've been so scared. I know. Fear's a hell of a motivator, but it's also a liar. Sung-ho stood, patting her shoulder. You're doing good, Jenny. Real good. Keep it up. My. Min-jae started bringing 2 thermal cups of coffee every morning. He never made a production of it. Just set one on Jennifer's desk as he passed. No words, no expectation, no fanfare. It became a ritual. A quiet, steady presence that said, I see you, without demanding anything in return. The coffee was always perfect, strong but smooth, with a hint of cinnamon that spoke of care and attention. Not the burnt breakroom sludge or the expensive cafe drinks that came with social obligation, but something in between. Personal. Intentional. One morning, Jennifer brought a cup for him. She'd woken up early, stopped at the small cafe near her apartment, and purchased 2 coffees. One for herself, one for Min-jae. Her heart pounded the entire bus ride to work, second-guessing the gesture. Was it too much? Would he read into it? Would it create an obligation she didn't intend? But then she remembered his words. You don't owe me anything. It's just coffee. She set it on his desk without a word, hands shaking slightly, waiting for him to make it into something significant, to ask why or to refuse, or to create meaning that would make it complicated. He didn't. He just looked up from his tablet, saw the coffee and smiled. Small, genuine, reaching his eyes. Thank you. Not why, not you didn't have to. Not what does this mean? Just thank you. Simple. Clean. Accepting. Jennifer felt something crack open in her chest, something warm and terrifying and utterly unfamiliar. The freedom of giving without calculating the cost. The safety of being seen without performance. You're welcome, she said, and walked away before the moment could become heavy. But throughout the day, she caught herself glancing at Min-jae's desk, watching him drink the coffee she'd brought, and feeling something she couldn't quite name. Connection, maybe. Or possibility. Or the beginning of understanding that relationships didn't have to be transactional. They ended up on the rooftop during a rare break, both of them drawn there by unspoken agreement when the warehouse became too loud, too crowded, too much. The São Paulo skyline stretched gray and endless under a cloudy sky, the city breathing beneath them with its constant hum of traffic and humanity. Min-jae leaned against the railing, hands in his pockets, watching the city below. Jennifer stood beside him, close enough to feel his presence but not touching, the space between them charged with things unsaid. Can I ask you something? Jennifer said, breaking the comfortable silence. Always. Why did you really start counting my apologies? The truth, not just the surface answer. Min-jae was quiet for a beat, his expression thoughtful. Because I recognized it. That reflex. Making yourself smaller to avoid conflict. Apologizing for existing. Taking up as little space as possible. I did it for years after my mother died. I thought if I stayed quiet, stayed out of the way, didn't ask for anything, my father wouldn't have one more thing to worry about. He turned to face her, and his eyes were distant, haunted by old pain. But all I did was disappear. I erased myself so completely that when I finally needed help, no one noticed. Because I'd trained them not to see me. What changed? A teacher. Mrs. Kim. She taught literature, and she had this way of seeing through bullshit. Min-jae's voice softened with memory. She pulled me aside one day and asked me the same question I asked you. Who made you feel like you don't deserve to take up space? And I didn't have an answer. I'd never thought about it that way. But the question stayed with me, haunted me, and eventually I realized I'd done it to myself. I'd internalized the silence, made it my identity, became so good at being invisible that I forgot how to be seen. Jennifer's throat tightened. How did you stop? I started small. I said no to things I didn't want to do. I stopped apologizing for asking questions in class. I let myself exist without performing constant gratitude. I took up space, in conversations, in rooms, in my own life. He looked at her directly, his gaze unwavering. It was terrifying. Every time I asserted a boundary, every time I said no, every time I asked for what I needed, I was sure people would hate me for it, reject me, confirm that I was too much, too demanding, too difficult. Did they? Some did. The people who'd benefited from my silence definitely didn't like the change. But the people who actually cared about me, they respected it, they celebrated it. And I realized, the ones who got angry when I set boundaries were never really my people anyway. Jennifer's vision blurred with unexpected tears. I don't know if I can do that. I've been this way for so long. You already are doing it. Min-jae's voice was gentle but certain. You said no to Vanessa. You stopped taking on everyone else's work. You let your hair down. He smiled slightly, that soft expression that transformed his usually serious face. You're reclaiming your space, one piece at a time, one boundary at a time. It doesn't have to be a revolution. It can be a series of small, quiet rebellions. Jennifer wiped her eyes, embarrassed by the tears. I'm scared. I know. That's not weakness. That's honesty. Min-jae's hand moved slightly, like he wanted to reach for hers but stopped himself. But you don't have to be fearless. You just have to be willing. Willing to try. Willing to fail. Willing to keep going even when it's uncomfortable. They stood in silence, the city sprawling below them. Two people learning what it meant to be seen and to see in return. The breaking point came during a shipment crisis 2 weeks later. A major client order had been delayed due to weather, and the team was scrambling to reroute inventory and manage expectations. The warehouse was chaos, phones ringing, supervisors barking orders, forklifts racing between aisles. Vanessa was at the center of it, tablet in hand, stress radiating off her in waves. Jenny, I need you to pull the manifest for all outstanding orders and cross-check every route for potential delays. I'm already managing the returns audit that's due today, Jennifer said calmly, not looking up from her screen. Lucas can handle the manifests. That's part of his routing responsibilities. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her jaw tight. Lucas is busy coordinating with the drivers. So am I. Jennifer met her gaze evenly. My audit can't be delayed without impacting corporate reporting. The manifest check can wait an hour, or someone else can do it. Tension crackled in the air. Everyone nearby stopped working, ears tuned to the confrontation. Lucas looked between them nervously. Sung-ho watched with barely concealed approval. Min-jae stepped forward, his presence calm but immovable. I'll handle the manifests. Jennifer's right. Her audit is time-sensitive. The manifest check isn't. Vanessa opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She knew she was outnumbered, knew that pushing further would expose her exploitation in front of witnesses. Fine. Min-jae, get it done in an hour. She walked away, her heels striking the concrete floor like hammer blows. The crisis passed. The shipments were rerouted. The client was appeased, and Jennifer completed her audit on time, without sacrificing her boundaries. Later, in the quiet of the loading dock, Min-jae found Jennifer checking inventory. The late afternoon sun painted everything golden, dust motes dancing in the light. You didn't have to back me up, she said without looking at him. I know. Min-jae leaned against a pallet, arms crossed in that relaxed posture she'd come to associate with his quiet strength. But I wanted to. Jennifer looked at him. Really looked. At the calm certainty in his posture, the steadiness in his gaze, the way he'd made space for her without taking over, supported without rescuing, witnessed without judgment. Thank you, she said softly, and this time the gratitude felt different, not obligatory, not transactional, just honest. You don't need to thank me. Min-jae's eyes held hers. You did the hard part. You stood your ground. You set the boundary. I just made sure Vanessa couldn't bulldoze over it. Jennifer felt something shift. Something irrevocable. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could. Min-jae's voice was certain, unshakable. You already had the strength. I just made sure you knew it was possible. That you didn't have to do it alone. The space between them felt charged, full of things unsaid but understood. Jennifer's heart hammered against her ribs, and for once, she didn't apologize for the feeling. Didn't try to make it smaller or more convenient. Min-jae, she started, not sure where the sentence would go. He waited, patient, giving her space to find the words. I'm glad you asked that question. The one about who made me feel like I need to apologize. I'm glad you counted. I'm glad you noticed. Her voice wavered but held. I'm glad you see me. Min-jae's expression softened. Something vulnerable flickering across his face. You were always worth seeing, Jennifer. Always. Weeks passed. Jennifer stopped apologizing for things that weren't her fault. She set boundaries with Vanessa. She declined tasks that weren't her responsibility. She took her full lunch break. She left work on time. She wore her hair however she wanted, sometimes pulled back, sometimes loose. Always her choice. And slowly, terrifyingly, wonderfully, she realized. The world didn't collapse. Vanessa's coldness became irrelevant. Jennifer discovered that she didn't need her supervisor's approval to have value. Lucas learned to manage his own workload, and while he grumbled about it, he survived. Rodrigo started distributing tasks more evenly across the team, forced to confront the unsustainable system he'd been perpetuating. The logistics center adapted. And Jennifer, she started to feel real, solid, present in her own life. She discovered she actually enjoyed parts of her job when she wasn't drowning in everyone else's responsibilities. She found satisfaction in completing her own projects well, in having time to do quality work instead of rushing through quantity. She made a friend in accounting, Maria, who'd been there 5 years, and had her own story about learning to set boundaries. One evening, as she clocked out, Min-jae walked beside her toward the bus stop. They'd fallen into this routine, not planned, not discussed, just something that happened naturally. Walking together through the cooling evening, the city transitioning from day to night around them. They didn't talk much. Just walked, the city buzzing around them, the sky turning orange and purple with the setting sun. The silence between them was comfortable now, no longer weighted with expectation or uncertainty. I'm proud of you, Min-jae said quietly as they reached the bus stop. Jennifer glanced at him, surprised by the direct statement. For what? For choosing yourself. His voice was warm, sincere. For deciding you matter. For claiming space. That takes more courage than most people ever manage. Her throat tightened with emotion. I don't know if I would have without you. You would have. Min-jae's voice was certain, absolute. It just might have taken longer. But the strength was always yours. I just helped you remember it was there. Jennifer's bus pulled up, brakes hissing, door opening with a mechanical wheeze. She turned to face him fully, heart pounding with something that felt like possibility. Min-jae? Yeah? Thank you for asking that question. The one no one else dared to. Her voice was steady now, clear. Thank you for seeing what everyone else ignored. Min-jae smiled, small, genuine, the kind that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. You deserve to hear it. You deserve to be seen. Jennifer boarded the bus. As it pulled away, she looked back through the dusty window. Min-jae was still standing there, hands in his pockets, watching her go with that steady presence that had become her anchor. And for the first time in years, maybe in her entire life, Jennifer felt seen. Truly, completely, undeniably seen. It happened on a Tuesday. No grand gesture, no dramatic confession, just Min-jae appearing at Jennifer's desk with 2 coffees and a small plant in a terracotta pot. What's this? Jennifer asked, eyeing the plant. It had deep green leaves with white variegation, delicate and resilient looking. A peace lily. Min-jae set it on the corner of her desk carefully. They're resilient. They survive even when neglected, even in low light and poor conditions. But they thrive when cared for properly, when given attention and space and the right environment. Jennifer looked at him, heart twisting with understanding. Why are you giving me a plant? Because you remind me of one. Min-jae's gaze was steady, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen from him. You've been surviving for so long, existing in conditions that weren't right for you, making do with neglect and exploitation. But I thought maybe it was time to thrive, to have something that reminds you that you deserve care. Consistent, unconditional care. Jennifer's breath hitched. Min-jae, you don't have to say anything. Min-jae's voice was soft, careful. I just wanted you to know. You're not alone. You never were. Not to me. And if you ever forget that you deserve to take up space, to be cared for, to thrive instead of just survive, you can look at this plant and remember. Jennifer stood, the distance between them suddenly unbearable. They were close enough that she could see the small scar above his left eyebrow, the slight nervous tension in his jaw, the way his eyes held both certainty and vulnerability. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let someone in without making myself smaller to fit. You don't have to make yourself smaller. Min-jae stepped closer, not touching, just present. You just have to let yourself be seen. The real you. Not the version you think people need or want or can tolerate. Just you. As you are. What if the real me isn't enough? Then I've been seeing the wrong person for the past 6 months. Min-jae's voice was low, almost vulnerable, stripped of all pretense. Because the person I see is brilliant, kind, resilient, and far stronger than she knows. The person I see is someone who survived years of making herself invisible and still found the courage to become visible again. The person I see is extraordinary. Jennifer's eyes burned with tears. I'm scared. I know. Min-jae finally reached out, his hand hovering near hers, not taking, just offering. But you don't have to be fearless. You just have to be willing. Willing to try. Willing to be seen. Willing to let someone care about you without performing constant gratitude or making yourself convenient. Jennifer took his hand. His fingers were warm, steady, grounding, real. Okay. Okay? Okay. Jennifer smiled, small and tentative and genuine. I'm willing. Min-jae's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gentle touch that felt like a promise. Then that's enough. That's everything. They stood there in the middle of the logistics center, surrounded by beeping scanners and rolling pallets, and the constant hum of commerce. Two people finding each other in the noise. Learning what it meant to be seen, and to see in return. Understanding that love, real love, didn't require erasure. It required presence. The final test came 3 weeks later. Corporate announced a restructuring. Roles would be evaluated. Performance reviews would determine who stayed and who was transitioned out. The phrase was corporate speak for fired, but wrapped in softer language. The tension in the logistics center was palpable. People whispered in corners. Resumes were quietly updated. Everyone walked on eggshells, trying to appear indispensable. Vanessa called a team meeting, her expression tight and controlled. As you all know, corporate is making changes. Evaluating efficiency, optimizing workflows, ensuring we have the right people in the right roles. I'll be conducting individual reviews over the next week. Jennifer, I'd like to start with you, my office, in 10 minutes. Jennifer's stomach twisted, but she didn't apologize. She just nodded. Those 10 minutes felt eternal. Jennifer used them to pull up her project logs, her completion rates, her quality metrics. Not because she was insecure, but because she was prepared. She knew her worth now, had the data to back it up. In Vanessa's office, the supervisor sat behind her desk, tablet open, expression cold and calculating. Jennifer, Your performance over the past few months has been inconsistent. Inconsistent how? Jennifer's voice was calm, professional. You've declined projects, pushed back on tasks, set boundaries. Vanessa made the word sound like a character flaw. That's not the team player attitude we value here. It's not the Jennifer we hired. With respect, Vanessa, I haven't declined projects that were outside my role. I've prioritized my core responsibilities and delivered results on time and above standard. Jennifer pulled up her tablet, turned it so Vanessa could see the screen. My completion rate is 94%. My quality metrics are the highest on the team. My projects have come in on schedule and under budget consistently. Vanessa's jaw tightened. But you used to go above and beyond. I used to overextend myself to the point of burnout. Jennifer's voice was steady, factual. I used to take on work that wasn't mine because I felt I had to in order to prove my value. But setting boundaries hasn't made me less effective. It's made me more effective. My actual performance has improved because I'm focused and sustainable instead of scattered and exhausted. Corporate values flexibility, and I've been flexible within my role. Jennifer didn't back down. But expecting employees to consistently work beyond their job descriptions without additional compensation isn't flexibility. It's exploitation, and it's not sustainable for the employee or the company. Vanessa's face flushed. I see you've developed quite the attitude. I've developed boundaries and self-respect. Jennifer stood, her ID badge hanging loose in her pocket, her hair falling free around her shoulders. If that's a problem for this company, then perhaps this isn't the right environment for me. But I won't apologize for knowing my worth and expecting to be treated accordingly. She left without waiting for dismissal, without apologizing, without shrinking. Her hands shook as she walked back to her desk, adrenaline surging through her system, but she held her head high. Min-jae was waiting outside the office, leaning against the wall in that casual posture that somehow conveyed absolute support. How'd it go? I don't know. Jennifer let out a shaky breath, then smiled. But I didn't apologize, not once, and I meant every word I said. Min-jae smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his face. Then, it went exactly right. 3 months later, the restructuring was complete. Vanessa had been transferred to a different facility. Lateral move, but everyone knew it was a demotion disguised with corporate language. Rodrigo had taken early retirement. Lucas had been let go, his consistent underperformance finally catching up to him without Jennifer to cover for him. And Jennifer? She'd been promoted to senior analyst with a raise and an official acknowledgement of her consistent excellence. She stood in the break room, hair down in loose curls, ID badge in her pocket instead of around her neck, a thermal cup of coffee in her hands. The peace lily Min-jae had given her sat on her desk, thriving under her care, its white blooms elegant and resilient. Min-jae appeared beside her with his own cup, and they clinked them together gently, a quiet ritual that had become theirs. A daily reminder that presence mattered, that small gestures built connection, that being seen was a gift to be celebrated. Remember when you asked me who made me feel like I needed to apologize? Jennifer said, looking out at the loading docks where afternoon sun painted everything gold. I remember. I think the answer was me. Jennifer looked at him, eyes clear, voice steady. I internalized it so deeply I didn't even realize I was doing it. Other people planted the seeds, but I cultivated them. I made it my identity. But you helped me see it. And that changed everything. Min-jae set his cup down and took her hand, his grip warm and sure and steady. You did the work, Jennifer. The hard, uncomfortable, scary work of changing patterns that had been keeping you safe. I just asked the question. You answered it. You faced it. You changed it. The right question at the right time. The necessary question. Min-jae's eyes held hers with that intensity that still made her heart race, even now. You deserve to know you didn't need to apologize for existing. You deserve to know you were worth seeing, worth caring about, worth taking up space. Jennifer smiled. Real, genuine, unguarded, free. I know that now. Finally. Really know it. Not just intellectually, but in my bones, in my body, in the way I move through the world. They stood there in the quiet hum of the logistics center. Two people who'd found each other in the noise, who'd learned that presence didn't require performance, that love began when you stopped erasing yourself, when you claimed space and invited someone to occupy it with you, not because you needed saving, but because you wanted companionship. Minjae squeezed her hand gently. You never needed to apologize, Jennifer. Not for breathing, not for existing, not for taking up space, not for having needs or boundaries or opinions. You never did. Jennifer leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, the solid warmth of his presence. The peace lily on her desk caught the afternoon light, its leaves glossy and green, thriving because it was finally in the right environment with the right care. I believe you, Jennifer whispered. Finally. Completely. I believe you. And in that moment, standing in an industrial break room with coffee-stained counters and flickering fluorescent lights, surrounded by the constant background noise of commerce and logistics, Jennifer felt something she'd been chasing her entire life. Peace. Not the peace of invisibility, not the peace of constant compliance, but the peace of being fully, honestly, unapologetically herself. The peace of being seen and loved not despite her humanity, but because of it. The peace of knowing she'd never have to apologize for existing again. This story is for everyone who's ever felt like they needed permission just to exist. You don't. You never did. Your presence is not an imposition. Your needs are not a burden. Your boundaries are not selfishness. You deserve to take up space. Messy, imperfect, fully human space. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you don't owe the world an apology for being real.